it has been 34 years since the film's release. Has the film ever left you?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it's always been in the periphery somewhere, like usually when you go to do a job or you meet people and it's the thing that they remember you about, So sometimes it's a great icebreaker, when someone says, "Oh, weren't you?" Although I did, once upon a time I got the woman in, I can't remember where it was now, asked me, "Didn't I used to be Mark Lee?" Which I found quite amusing.
Mark, I'm sensing that as proud as you obviously are of the film, that there's a tinge of regret about the fact that you're so instantly recognised for that film and that film mainly. Is that the case?
No, not regret. I mean, when you do the most high-profile thing, and which you'll probably ever do in your career, then it's inevitable. But look, to be quite honest with you, people are usually very kind, and they want to talk about how it moved them in some way. And so that I've always thought that's pretty lovely. So, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely the highest profile thing. Not my best work, I'd say, but. It's defined a slice of my life, and now you've got other generations watching it, which is a very strange thing for a film's life to have. It's nice to come to peace with something that you've sort of wrestled with in various ways over the years, and it's look, as I said, usually it's the public response which has always been really very kind. And when someone comes up to you, 3 generations later and says, "I saw this at school and it meant this to me," you sort of go, well, okay, it's not a bad thing to be a part of at all.
What have you done that you consider to be a better work for you as an actor than Gallipoli?
Oh, I've done some stage work. I've done some smaller films, directing, just a better understanding of things. I mean.
Sure.
That film was that film carried. All my failings were sort of gently erased by a wonderful film.
That final freeze frame of Gallipoli is, without argument, the most iconic image of any Australian film. I'm very keen to know how many times you had to do that final run and that final shot when you when you pull back with the impact of the bullet. How many times did you have to do that?
Well, it's interesting because it was never the final frame of the film originally. The film had a whole other scene which was shot with Mel and one of the officers and lots of bodies and stretcher bearers. So it had a whole dialogue scene that my character just disappears. He sort of shot, disappears, and there's a final scene in the trenches. What happened was that when it was cut together, Peter was not quite sure it was the right way to finish the film. It was sort of almost a black joke. There was a line about they're reconsidering our situation, where it was obviously a horrendous situation already done, and he felt it was a bit glib. So he was trying to work out where he would finish the film, and they went back to the footage of me being shot. And that's where the frame came from. That's where the freeze came from. The actual run was done twice because one of the special effects didn't work the first time. It took about 4 hours to set me up, so it was a full day to get a couple of runs. You sort of, what they did was you wear back then you wore a leather vest which had foam on one side, leather on the other side, and this sort of like black tack stuff, and they would put detonators in there. And the first thing the special effects guys would say to you is, keep your fingers away from your chest. And they did all that. I had one in my head, my hair. There was a bit of fake hair there on the arm. And the receiver was in the water bottle, so that you just run, and at some point someone pushes a button and you don't have to act. You just react.
Now, the DVD and Blu-ray release of this film has got some very, very good extras on it, which includes interviews with you, with Peter Weir, the director, and with Mel Gibson. Now, Peter Weir says in the interview how you basically almost folded on your first day, and he brought you out of your your state of nerves by playing Ry Cooder. Just for a moment, can you just take us back to that first day? Tell us what it was that was running through your head that made you have such a case of stage fright, or camera fright, as we should call it.
Well, we got out there, everything was set up, and it was the first time I realised how big the shoot was going to be, and I became incredibly nervous. It had dialogue which was coming out in a very stilted way. I then watched some of the crew look at each other, and a couple of them rolled their eyes going, "Oh God, this is a mistake." So the anxiety level increased, and Peter said to the sound guy, "I'm going to play some music." I can't even remember what the song was. It was from Bop Till You Drop, and it was this instrumental called "I Think It's Going to Work Out Fine." And the sound guy said, "Oh, but there's dialogue." He said, don't worry. He said, "Guys," and he just had us muck around and improvise a bit and just made it enjoyable. And I went, okay, and I started to get into the feel of it, but it was a little hard to shake. I mean, suddenly your own inexperience is like a beacon amongst some very hardened, terrific people, both cast and crew. It was a little bit frightening, but what do they say? Fear is the door to the unknown. You just got to unlock the door. And so Peter did it with a Ry Cooder song.
Now, Mark, again, I'm getting the sense that when you made the film, you had no idea what it was going to become and how it was going to live on. It seems that you're very comfortable with that now, but you weren't initially. Can you just tell me a little bit about how that transition occurred, how you actually got comfortable with the fact that this film was going to live on and have such a legacy, and that you were so much a part of it?
I'm just trying to think. I went through some funny phases with my work. During my 30s, I didn't work much at all. I ended up, I worked for a builder for about 9 years, I suppose. And then it was not long after that I started to do some stage work where I began and did some classes and stuff. So it wasn't until, I suppose, my 40s I started to really enjoy it again. And it was during that time you sort of come to peace with the thing that you think is maybe the only thing that'll ever define you. And then you realise that's actually not quite true. It's just something that moves people a certain way. And I suddenly realised that, when 10 years went by, and then 20 years went by, and then suddenly you've got 34 years going by, and there's another couple of generations have gone, "Oh, this film's moved me," and I watched it on DVD, or I watched it on video, or, I watched it at school. And I think, well, it's kind of good to be part of something that's touched people in such a way that make them want to reflect on the nation, I guess. I mean, the film is essentially, it's less of a war film and more of a film about a journey. And it's like, you could look at the two characters as symbols of Australia, old and new Australia. One will be cold and one will be a little harder and a little more cynical about the world. So I think the way it's touched people sort of helps you come to terms with certain things. And now, 57, I've got two daughters. One works in the film industry, one works as a social worker. I think the biggest problem is you probably find you sort of get rid of your own self-importance, and then you can actually look at it for what it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In a way, you've actually become a veteran of the war, in a way, by proxy. Do you ever feel that?
No, not quite. It was nice that, we were able to do it at a time when there were still men to talk to. I mean, this is, veterans who were, in their 80s or late 70s when we chatted to them. But it was nice to have been able to have done that, because you felt a connection. It's like, it's a minimal connection, but you felt, that there was still a through line when people are still alive, and it's living history. And when you make a film, when there's still that resource. I don't mean that in a callous way, but when it's that resource is there, yeah, you feel you're part of something, or a documentation of history in a sense.
Yeah, when Alec Campbell, the last survivor of Gallipoli, died in 2002, you feel that a film like that actually takes on a new meaning, because that now is one of, if you like, the vessels of memory and of experience that will carry on now that all these guys have died.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it does. Because it was at a time when they were still around. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And
the film is also used as an educational tool, Mark, which I understand you're very, very happy about.
Oh yeah. And this is something that I've always been very concerned with. That it's not just the emotive journey or the emotional journey of a film, that it needs historical context, so we don't get carried away with something we don't understand. There's nothing worse than nationalism sprouting out of ignorance. It's always dangerous when that happens, and it's nice that when the school is involved, then there's history, there's context, and I think that's imperative, especially when something makes people so emotional. I mean, the end of the film affects, especially kids in their teens, it would affect them a certain way. And I think it's important that they have the other woven into that as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the one big lesson you think the film has for younger generations.
Look, I don't think. See, it's kind of weird. I mean, Peter Weir was always very certain that he said that he'd never wanted the film pigeonholed into anti-war or whatever. He made it was a story. It was a story of a journey to a destination, to a fate. Look, we the trouble is, I mean, someone once said this: you can make war films and anti-war films till the cows come home, but the trouble is, mankind seems to, at some point, rebel in war. It's something he goes back to time and time again. So you can only, I guess, try and make a human and an emotional contact there. So when you relate to humans rather than like a documentary or an epic, where there's thousands of extras and thousands of battles, I think that's when people at least begin to look at what it is and what it can do as a destructive force. But the film was certainly never set out to be a message film. It was a story of a journey and a friendship.
Do you feel that the film has dated in any way, Mark?
I think it's inevitable that with changing tastes in films, that some dating will happen with films. I mean, even in editing, how long we hold a shot these days has changed. The taste of how long a shot is held. Back then, it was you can probably count a good 5 seconds on some takes. But it was kind of fascinating because we have no, other than visceral special effects, there were no digital. There was nothing else they could use. It was shaking film for cannons going off because they couldn't move the cannons. Things like that. Music will always date a film. And the odd thing about music is sometimes it comes round again. I still love the Adagio.
Oh, and yeah, that works beautifully.
I love the Pearl Fishers when Bill Hunter's character listens to them on the gramophone. I find that really moving. Sure.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about your post-Gallipoli career? You seem primed for a film career. You've done a lot of television and you have done a lot of stage. Did you deliberately steer away from film, or is that just the way the cards fell?
I think film deliberately steered away from me.
Why? Weren't you a hot young property?
No, I did some not terribly good ones. Look, I had a lot of developing to do. And did some work that films weren't that great. The work was so. I just just because you're thrust into something with a really good film doesn't mean you can actually carry it forward. And I had to walk away from it for a little bit and learn a few things and come back. The stage has been great for that. I've done a lot of stage in the last few years and I've just had a ball. But yeah, I suppose that's the reason. But you can never tell. I mean, it's funny the way things will fall. But technically, probably not ready for it anyway.